Okay, the meeting is now being streamed live.
Sir, you are host now.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Jyoti is also joining us for the first time, I think. Okay, Dr. Jyoti is also joining us for the first time. Welcome, Dr. Jyoti. While her audio is connecting. Okay, so what we are doing today is we are looking at the, hang on. We are looking at the demographic imperatives. In fact, demography becomes a very important thing, considering the fact that demography and associated concepts are something which spans over a large period of time. More often than not, we don't tend to look at demography in a very long-term scenario, but demographic imperatives play out in a very long-term scenario. So let's look at the demographic. This is unit 4 of block 1. After this, next week we'll be doing the economic, imperatives or the economic considerations of migration. Start with the objectives, demographic features of the international migration, impacts of international migration flow from one region to another. So about 1 billion people have been added to the global population. So the population keeps on growing, which we all know. Migration is one of the outcomes of the pressure on resources. Uh, and it's not uniform across the world. It can happen due to several factors. So let me tell you the story about these homeless children who would come to my house. I live in Gurgaon, come to my house in Gurgaon. And as I got talking to them, and here I'm not talking about international migration, I'm talking about domestic migration. I got to find out that these children come in from Rajasthan, districts of Ajmer, and they are homeless in Gurgaon. But the fact is, they have homes in Rajasthan. So why are they in? Okay, Dr. Jyoti wants to allow. Okay, Jyoti, you can record locally. So why were they homeless in Gurgaon? Because okay. Okay. So, why were they very good now? Because there is nothing in terms of profession, or there's no water, or the land is not fertile enough to produce. So these people come to Gurgaon and do all kinds of jobs. These children go about begging or collecting various things. So, there is this pressure on resources which happen, which leads to migration, which could be domestic or across borders. There are an estimate of 281 million people living in a country other than their country of birth in 2020, which is about 120 million more in 1990. So you see, inevitably,
I think about just one thing, Dr. Jyoti or whoever is recording, we have already, this is live streamed in YouTube. I'll give the link. So don't waste your computer space. It's already there.
is Jyoti, can you, have
Yes,
you got?
whoever is recording, you can record, but not record because all these are
Okay.
available.
Okay, that's very helpful. Okay, Priyanka also. Priyanka, you have also come for the first time. Welcome to the class. I'm seeing some new students. Okay, Population Development Bureau talks about international migration will be 400 million by 2020, assuming climate change does not bring in more migration. So these are figures which were okay. Priyanka says for the first time. These are projected in 2013. I picked up this, I got this graph, in fact, in one of in some resource on the net, where we talked about college education or more, and less than college education in terms of expressing intent to move abroad. This is global. And in fact, when we look at regional wise, these fluctuate widely based on many factors. As we talked about, it could be a social factor, it could be an economic factor, it could be an environment factor, it could be a technical factor. There are multiple factors by which people move. And it states that the largest corridors tend to be from developing countries to larger economies, such as United States, United Arab. Now, inevitably in migration, there are two kinds of pressures which come in. There is something called a push, and there is something called a pull. Inevitably, we'll see when we come to the economics part of it, how does the push factor work and how does the pull factor work? For example, a whole lot of people in the developing countries are pulled towards the United States, possibly because of a pull factor of their American dream. It almost seems like looking at a Hollywood movie or, from various places where information comes to them, that the minute they land in America, it's going to be a great life. There's going to be gold on the streets and so. So it's almost like it's a pull factor. So there is, these corridors which get developed from to larger economies. Okay. Large corridors can also reflect protracted conflict and related displacement, such as Syrian Arab Republic to Turkey. It's a and if you remember, the Syrian conflict has been playing out since 2011 when the Arab Spring started. So, these are the reasons why. And for example, let's look at Myanmar. There's a conflict which is playing out, the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which is playing out in the Middle East. So there are all these conflicts which lead to people migrating. Then, of course, COVID-19 impacted work culture in greater automation, work from home, affected, labor migration corridors. It affected a lot of migration. Complex demographic changes is happening in human mobility. But we have also seen across units since the time we started, the story of human beings is a story of movement, because inevitably all human beings came out of Africa. They have been continuously moving. And the interesting part is there is this complex negotiation between movement and restriction. Economic, political, military power has radically shifted, with powers now more evenly distributed. International system, core human values have been challenged. And in fact, when you look at it, on one hand, we look at from the human rights issue, humans have right. From the second hand, we look at a security lens issue where all nations are looking at, immigrants with suspicion. So there are three important dynamics significant in demographic or global migration. One are these global migration corridors or south-north migration corridors. These south-north are more of a category. It's not like global south and global north. These are categories based on, we'll see how they have been defined in terms of nations. Then there is an aging population, and there is then the third aspect is the feminization of migration. More and more women are migrating today than they were earlier. So let's look at all the three. So let's look at the first, the global migration corridors. Divide in the global political economy, impact on international migration. Two giant corridors, global south and global north. And the north and south is not geographic, though more often than not, they pan out geographically, because also you need to understand more of the colonized countries were in the global south, the colonizers were global north. But these groupings are according along the socio-economic and political characteristics. And that becomes a very interesting part because now we see across the north, most of the Western countries are trying to limit immigration. But these were the same countries who colonized the other countries, who indulged in slave trade, who indulged in indentured labor, and now they are trying to stop. But the problem is they themselves are going through what we call aging population, or the population is in terms of age. Though there have been migration within South-South and North-North, so inevitably a lot of migration happens South to South. When we look at migration, we'll see a lot of migration happens across boundaries in the region. For example, if you see Nepal to India, or Bangladesh to India, or India to the Gulf, though India and the Gulf would be, it is West Asia compared to South-North migration. So Global South represents higher population, has eased immigration regulation for skilled workers. That's Naman saying. Obviously, because Germany has, the kind of demographics in terms of population, in terms of birth rate, and to get a nation to work, there are a whole lot of jobs which they don't have workforce for. And that is why they need to get immigration in, because that in fact if you look around in India, a lot of the lower unskilled or lower skilled jobs are typically done by people who either have migrated from rural to urban area, or who are migrants from, let's say, Bangladesh. So that is how there is a demographic, imperative for immigration to happen, or migration to happen. And irrespective of the fact that politically a lot of rhetoric is talked about immigrants and security, it's a compulsion by which these countries want immigrants. Many of the global south countries have younger workforce population. You look at India. India has a major demographic dividend. Our population is young compared to a lot of other countries. So if you look at this is a United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs 2019 chart in terms of 20 origin countries and 20 destination countries. Interestingly, India is the largest source of immigrant. South Asia is a source, yes, Swadesh, because it has got a younger population compared to, let's say, the North. So if you see India in 2020, I think India, or 2020 or 2022, 17.9 million people migrated. So India becomes the top origin countries for migration. Obviously, there is a large population pressure on the country. Then in terms of job creation, in terms of economics, in terms of better opportunities, if you see China is number fourth. And if you see in terms, a very interesting thing is in terms of origin and destination countries, Russia, which is third in terms of origin countries and third in terms of destination countries. So there is a lot of turnaround in Russia in terms of leaving and coming. And they have done a pie chart also in terms of non-G20 countries and G20 countries. So this is an interesting chart in terms of how people are moving, people anyway are moving. And if you notice, in terms of origin countries, United States also comes somewhere. Okay. The second aspect is aging population. Inevitably, population ages unless the population is replaced by new birth rates. I was reading about Japan. For every child born, two people are dying in Japan. So their population is actually reducing. On the other hand, the migrants reduce with, so inevitably people migrate when they are younger. They don't migrate when they are older, i.e. more younger people migrate. It creates a demand for migrant labor force, such as a demand on healthcare system. So the more the aged population, the more demand for healthcare. For example, we had in earlier units looked at the case study of these Keralite girls who were taken to Germany for the healthcare system after the World War II. So all these countries now demand healthcare. They don't have enough healthcare professionals. And then there is a demand which rises, which is supplied by younger population from the global south. Usually two measures taken to address the side of aging population: increase in fertility, allow immigration. Inevitably, we've also seen with higher education, more and more families, less children. Always there is a direct correlation between education and family size. So inevitably, because you can't increase the fertility, the second is to allow immigration. As what Naman was talking about, Germany has allowed, wants more immigration to come in. All countries are looking at immigration, especially in the global north. Global south is relatively young population, migrate to global north. Not only high-end workers, but caregivers for elderly, housemates, and many other low-skilled areas. And inevitably, for a country or an economy to move, there are multiple people required in multiple areas, in multiple skill sets. For people who have joined for the first time, the way this class goes, you can stop me at any moment of time to pose a question or a query. If you have something to value add, you can put it as a chat or stop and add that as a value. That way, the class becomes a little more interactive rather than a monologue from my side. So all of you have some experiences. You can share those experiences. That makes the perspectives richer. Also, for people who have joined for the first time, remember, as a part of academics and scholarly pursuit, we don't talk about rights and wrongs, correct or incorrect. These are all perspectives. Every perspective is a right perspective. Also, everything that is presented, if there is a definition, who has given the definition, if there is a data, from where has the data come, because that becomes important, because each scholar can present a particular viewpoint, and it's very important to understand what is the viewpoint of which scholar, because you can find in scholarly and academic pursuits two people giving contradictory views. That's how academics works. So, as the ratio of aged to total population increasing, working population declines, productivity is affected, growth deaccelerates, social security system becomes fiscally unstable. So, demographics is not something that you can, get up and take a decision. This has to be planned in terms of anything that you say. For example, I'll give you a very interesting example. China, in trying to stop its population, came up with a one family, one child law, and how laws become counterproductive. We'll look at it, because remember, with large countries, large population, and a very diverse population, how the laws are understood, how the laws are implemented also becomes, have very unseen consequences. So when they came out with this one family, one child law, China, like India, is heavily biased for the male child for some reason. The the Oriental economies or the Oriental countries have this, thing about these boys. The unseen consequences were the girl children started getting trafficked for adoptions abroad. But that was just one consequence. The second consequence was that now there was this whole population of boys with no girls to marry. And then women got trafficked into China to become wives for these guys, as what happened in Haryana. When the sex ratio declined beyond 900, there were no girls for these boys. And then they started there were these Jat boys who were marrying Keralite girls, and then suddenly we had this Jat land where dosa was being made. Now look at how it affects the culture. These are unseen consequences of things that when you play with demographics. The result in change of savings, investment behavior, labor supply, aggregate demand and supply responses. So all these things go for a toss. So if you look at a chart on the aging population, by 2017, there were a billion people 60 years and above. By 2050, they are talking about 2.1 billion. And countries have to plan for this aging population, because if you're not planning for this aging population in terms of healthcare, in terms of, and today with healthcare improving, you have people who are fit and fine till about 70, 80. If they are not productive, then there are other issues. There are healthcare issues. There are mental issues. All these things have to be planned for. Then the third thing which has happened is the feminization of migration. And you will hear this word pretty often. Composition of migration has also been changing with the rise of service sector and international student migration. So today a large migrant population is the student population, which moves wherever they are able to find their courses, where there are scholarships or there is funding. Since 1990, proportion of female migrants have increased in all regions except East Asia and Pacific. Proportion of women number varies considerably across region. Earlier, most women migration was in terms of marriage. But subsequently, women have been moving for jobs, women have been moving for education. And so tourism, there are a whole lot of women tourists who are moving around. While in 2000, the male to female split was 50.6 to 49.4. In 2020, split is 51.9 to 48%. The COVID might have affected some amount of migration. What is unique is that women as independent migrant has increased in proportion to migration due to marriage. That is what has happened. More women are financially independent. More women are taking decisions on their own in terms of whether to move or not to move, the reason to move, and so on and so forth. So this is what is called feminization of migration. And this is also what we were talking in earlier unit. Most of the data that was collected earlier was on males. It was assumed that males were the ones who were migrating. Suddenly they found out that there is a feminization of migration. The way migration affects women is totally different from the way migration affects males. So, scholars and researchers then scrambled to, start taking the female part of the migration. So, if you look at the total international migrant stock by region and sex, if you see Asia, if you see Latin America, and if you see Africa, there is more women migration than men. No, no. In fact, North America is more, Europe is more. Asia, Latin America, and Africa, women migration is less. The blue is the women, the peacock color is the male, and which is also what Philips Swadesh Philippines. A large Philippines sends a very large women population, women migrants for caregivers to Gulf countries, to in fact across the world. Though we had seen that Philippine economy is majorly supported by the migrants and remittance coming by the migrants. So this is the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs DESA Population Division 2020. Okay. Canada recently announced a 2-year temporary cap on the number of new students to ease pressure on housing and resources. And so that's right, Priyanka, that inevitably each country has to keep planning these things in terms of migration, in terms of how the, and between Canada and US, Canada is much more, reactive in terms of immigrants and, for their plannings. But this time I there was this student who came from Toronto in Canada who was talking about a homeless problem in Toronto, which was unheard of some time back. So and then we were trying to figure out whether this homeless were the immigrant homeless or the local people homeless. COVID did put a lot of pressure on a lot of societies in terms of job loss, in terms of health and so on and so forth. So we were not sure. So obviously that needed some more finding out. But all the countries have to keep looking at how the immigrants are coming in, what, and especially in global north and these Western countries where there is a certain amount of welfareism, where there are these the state takes care of their citizens, then they have to plan. Okay, so Priyanka has talked about Canada. Okay, so let's look at a little bit about the Indian diaspora. The unit also talks about the Indian diaspora. We have already gone through it once in earlier unit. Caregiver job is again a new emerging sector for female migrants and low educated. Uh, Jyoti, are you a medical doctor or a different doctor? And anyway, we have been talking about caregiving jobs. For example, Filipino women have been in the caregiving sector since a very long time. In fact, we had a case study of these Keralite girls in the 60s who had were taken to Germany. I'm from the social science. Okay. So there was this case study. In fact, you can go on YouTube and search out this video on these Keralite girls who were taken from Keralite villages, taken to Germany for caregiving. They were trained as nurses. And in fact, a lot of these women then settled in Germany. There's a whole documentary on it. I think it was Shrestha who brought it to our notice. So there's this whole documentary on caregiving. So caregiving also has been since long. In fact, after World War II and Europe started reconstructing, they were short of people. Remember, millions of people died during World War II. And then they were short of people. They had all these guest workers, especially Germany. They had these guest workers coming in from various parts of the world. And these guest workers, then a lot of them settled in Germany. But you're right, caregiving has been, an upcoming, thing across the world, especially with countries where there are aging populations. Meenal, Shrestha, have you got the YouTube link? If you have, kindly share. Otherwise, Meenal, all the people, in case you want, you can send me a mail. I can share the link with you. I don't have it right now. That's my email ID. I'm sharing out on chat. You can send me a mail. I'll send you the link. I have the link with me. Or you can go on YouTube and search for documentary on Kerala nurses in Germany. I think you'll be able to find it. So, Indian diaspora's three parts: colonial, post-independence, neoliberal period, 1990 and 1991. Uh, International labor migration has three stages of decision making. Every time there is people have to migrate, they have to take a decision to migrate or to remain at home. Then the decision is in terms of choice of destination, the manner by which expats re-engage or choose not to re-engage with their country of origin. More often than not, a lot of people do not want to re-engage back. They want to just leave. Though it becomes difficult considering memories, considering the sentimentality of homeland, that connections back home. Uh, so inevitably, Priyanka, you're absolutely right, but that is a totally different stream of academic pursuit. Human trafficking is an absolutely different part. In fact, a lot of migration, especially through illegal routes, can lead to human trafficking. Though more often than not, human trafficking, unless it is caught, nobody knows whether these people have moved. So it's a separate thing. In fact, there is a new course which is going to come up in IGNOU on human trafficking. But you're right, there is a lot of people who are are trafficked across the world, across regions, across countries. So there are three decisions in terms of when people decide to migrate. So when you look at the Indian diaspora, formation of is the result of and there are different waves of migrations which spans hundreds of years, driven by a variety of factors. Earlier, it was slavery. Then they were indentured labor. Once slavery was abolished under colonization, and the guest work program, which was almost like an indentured labor, but it was termed as the guest work, where you go and work in different geographies. Contemporary flow, two kinds. First is highly skilled professionals, workers and students with tertiary and higher education. Developed countries, flow started after Indian independence, gathered momentum. uh, Trafficking and smuggling of migrants is Meenal, it is something like this. I uh, so typically you are a poor person, and I as an agent, or I as a criminal gang, want people to do forced labor. So what I do is I entice you or deceive you into showing that you'll get this particular job. What typically happened with these women from Punjab who reached the Gulf region, they were trafficked. In fact, they were deceived into going there, and by saying that they would get these wonderful jobs with wonderful money, and then uh, essentially they reached out there and there was no job, their passports were taken, and they were pushed into sex trade. That is how trafficking happening. Smuggling is typically when I take these people effectively. A lot of times smuggling and trafficking are interchangeably, because you smuggle people and then put them in forced labor or sex trade. But inevitably, for example, let's say a person is migrating, and these people say we will provide you. They are migrating through irregular routes. These people say that we are going to take you through these irregular routes to get you into the place where you want. So for example, there was this plane of Indian migrants which was stopped in France with 300 migrants on board. They were being smuggled inside. They were not trafficking, they were being smuggled inside France, from where they were taken into Canada and US. A part of these people might be trafficked into forced labor. So there is a slight difference. Meenal, between smuggling and trafficking. Smuggling is what you do in smuggling. You don't declare and you push the person out there. Trafficking is more in terms of using them for forced labor or for sex or for jobs, which is illegal. Meenal? Sada, are you there? Do you want to add something? Okay, I think Sada has left. So there are two kinds. First is highly skilled. Flow started out of Indian independence, gathered momentum with IT professionals in 1990. And the second was the unskilled and semi-skilled, going mostly to Gulf and Malaysia, oil boom. Started with the South Indians, especially Keralites, of late from UP, Bihar, leading states of origin for such migration. In fact, I was told by one of the students that now people from Kerala prefer the West rather than the Gulf. Obviously, we know because in Gulf you cannot get a citizenship however long you stay, whereas in the West you can naturalize and get a citizenship. These migratory flows have resulted in diverse communities of people of Indian origins in various parts of the world. So, whenever we talk about the Indian diaspora, it's not a monolith or a homogeneous diaspora. There are people from multiple states, multiple languages. Uh, they have multiple skill, multiple education. Then the hang on. What is this? When victim is aware of transporter illegal movement, it is human smuggling. When victim isn't aware, thank you, Kangat. When victim is aware of transporter illegal movement, it is smuggling, human smuggling. When victim isn't aware, it is human trafficking. So that's an addition from Kangat. So in the colonial area, 2 million Indians had been shipped in Asia, Africa, Caribbeans, and these were indentured from northern and central parts of India, mainly working at indentured laborers, work in sugar, tea, and cotton plantations. In fact, the Sri Lankan problem and the Tamils out there, most of the Tamils were taken as indentured to work in the plantations in Sri Lanka. Then they settled out there. Okay. Post-independence, to serve colonies of British Empire, most prominent destinations was UK. Then there was the Immigration Act of 68, which brought forth restrictions to UK, but people didn't stop. They started going to US and Canada. Uh, with oil boom in the Middle East, people moved to the Middle East for unskilled workers. So we have gone through this. So I'll move. Then, of course, the 1990-91, when the economy opened up under Manmohan Singh, there was impetus towards globalization, massive immigration flow of Indian workers, skilled labor, student migration, higher income countries. So today we have a lot of people in the West studying, doing jobs, majority of unskilled, again, Gulf, vast improvement economic structure of Indian diaspora. Also, the Indian government started acknowledging the role of Indian diaspora. This was the 1991 period, the neoliberal period. So there were unskilled workers which moved to countries of Southern Europe like Spain and Italy. 79% reside in Western Asian countries and 18% in South Asian. The remaining Indians are spread around Central Asia, Eastern Asia, and Southern Asia. Hang on. Yeah. In Western Asia, United Arab Emirates is the most preferred location for Indian immigrants, followed by Saudi. Obviously, the Gulf boom. Now, there was a very interesting thing that I came across. The proportion of Indian migrants is highest in Pakistan, followed by Nepal. Now, I tried to find out. I didn't get time further to find out. But supposedly this is true in Eastern Asia, Japan has the highest proportion because I came across this news item. which kind of baffled me, though I could not find out because somehow I didn't get the time to, search further. But in case some of you search and find out, please share it in the class next week as to how is it a categorization by which they are talking about, because inevitably I know to migrate or to move into Pakistan, or the fact is, unless they are talking about post 47 people movement, or who have categorized as Indians are living in Pakistan. So I really do not know. So if anybody finds out, please share it in the class. Okay. This is the Indian diaspora across the globe. Okay, Shrestha, thank you. Indian diaspora across the globe. So if you see 67.9% in Asia, 19.25 in North America, 8.5 in Europe, 3.65 Oceania, 0.57 Africa. Though Africa should have been more, but after what happened to Indians in Uganda, where they were thrown out, uh, I guess those people then moved to Europe and America. There is a very less percent in Latin America and Caribbeans. Though I would be surprised because they should have been more, but I guess a lot of those people in the Caribbeans do not want to say they are from an Indian ancestry. Smuggling, consent involved, trafficking without consent. Thank you, Praful. Okay, let's sum up. Migration, complex issue. 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes first-time contribution of migration to sustainable development. 10 out of 17 goals contain targets and indicators relevant to migrant. And that's the interesting part. So we are talking about migrants being important. We are talking about immigration being important because it helps global economy. It helps countries. Yet there is, this politics which are played around immigrants. Yet, countries, politicians bring in those identity politics which lead to xenophobia and all kinds of issues. So this complex negotiation in the world is going on. As the migration is a dynamic phenomena, it responds to a complex range of factors: geopolitical situation, technology change, increase in global population, demand for scarce resources, aging population, many parts of the world. Migration will constantly change. There have been increasing case of anti-migration, anti-migrant attitudes. Important to manage migration better for a sustainable development. So nations have to not only look at their citizens, they have to look at immigrants. Immigrants will happen all the time, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the end of this presentation. Let me switch on my video in case, okay, hi. In case there is any question that you would like to ask. Any questions that you would like to ask? So this thing about smuggling and trafficking got cleared. What was that on the 2030 agenda? These are the sustainable development goals. They were the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, which were targeted till 2015. So, for example, there were these sustainable development goals talking about gender equality, talking about education. Hang on, please reshare it. Hang on. Just a sec. Meenal. Uh, hmm, where did it go? Hang on, let me stop my video. 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So this is the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development. These are called the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. You can look up SDGs. The contribution of migration to sustainable development. So obviously the world is talking about sustainable development in terms of gender issues, in terms of education issues, in terms of sanitation. contribution of migration to sustainable development in 10 of the 17 goals that are relevant to migration or mobility. So, Meenal, if you look up these SDGs, they now see inevitably there is this, uh, this strain of thoughts in terms of immigration is bad, migrants are bad, they spoil this and that. But the UN has said that obviously this help in various other ways. So that is how they are linking the sustainable development goals onto the contribution of migration. Large population, legal and illegal migration. Kankat, it's the same with every country now. It's the same with every country. It is a complex issue. More often than not, in the apps. See, again, in the apps, one of the factors they talk about, because of this identity politics and the politicians bringing up this migrant issues into politics, what typically happens is then, see, migration will continue to happen. But when you stop the legal routes to migration, then people will take the illegal routes. When people take illegal routes, there is a higher chance of trafficking and smuggling. When there are higher chance of trafficking, that leads to an unintended other set of issues. So instead, if there is a case, and they talk about if the fact that if it becomes legal in terms of, okay, this is how much we want, these are the routes, if there is a problem, you come in or whatever. And this is it's a global issue. It cannot be handled on a country to country basis. When this comes in, otherwise it becomes a complex issue and people are migrating. So for example, the question is, when Europe wanted to do its industrialized revolution and wanted raw materials, it came in, took slaves, took indentured labor, did whatever it wanted with the colonial with colonized countries. But when these countries now want to go out there, they say no, we can't. So then this becomes a discussion point. And inevitably, in each country today, it is a complex issue because migration will not stop. For example, look at the West. There is an aging population. There is a need for healthcare. So you say, oh, these migrants are a problem. There are security nightmare, this, that, and the other. Then obviously there is this people who are trafficked. I was reading about begging as people are trafficked for begging into Europe now. So all kinds of things will happen because, demographic will keep moving, migration will keep moving. Priyanka, that happens because inevitably, there is a certain amount of identity politics which gets played out in each country. See, again, please understand, this is not a country or a second country. Politicians would like to use that as as a factor for their own politics. But then there are other factors which happen parallelly. World does not work on a deterministic way. There are multiple things which happen currently. So, for example, we heard about this family from Gujarat which froze to death because they were doing this illegal migration from Canada to US. The whole family died. They got stuck in snow. So obviously, and their Gujarat is, one of the more, developed states. Their per capita income is much more than, let's say, UP or Bihar. And yet they had to take this arduous journey. Or obviously, they had used some smugglers to get into this place. So things will keep on happening. Yes, at the Canada border, absolutely. Okay. Any other question? So again, as I said, the objective of this course is to look at all these things in its various forms. So that is where all you people keep value adding. That's what I keep saying when I'm taking a PPT, and the PPT I make it normally using the unit, the self-learning module that has been given to you. In case I find the content of the self-learning module not enough, then I pick up resources from outside so that you are, I'm able to present in a structured way. But at the same time, in the class, people keep value adding, as you have seen for people who have joined for the first time. People keep on value adding by their comments, by their chats, by their experiences. So we are able to get diverse perspectives onto the subject. And that way, one of the objective is to get that diploma that you have enrolled for. But there is a second objective of enhancing your knowledge and enhancing the various kinds of perspectives which come in that knowledge. Guys, any other question? Okay, so in case there is no other question, let's call it a day. You have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you again next Saturday, 3 o'clock. And we'll take Unit 5, which is the economic determinants or something to do with economics. What are the economics based on which the decision to migrate come in? And in case, what could be the factors that motivate people from developed states? Priyanka, you need to understand when we talk about developed states, how do we define development? Do we define development as per capita income? Do we define development as GDP? Do we define development on human, indices? What do we define development? More often than not, most common way of defining development is economic. But we also know when we talk about GDP or per capita income, it is an average. So let's say if I and Mukesh Ambani stand toe to toe, the per capita income of two people will be in billions of rupees. But we know very well that I will not stand on the human indices as Mukesh. So when we talk about, let's say, a state like Gujarat and we say developed, what is it developed about? More often than not, it's economically developed. And when we say, let's say the per capita income of Gujarat, say, look at yesterday I was reading per capita, Delhi has one of the highest per capita income of 2 lakh or more something annually or whatever, however it is defined. Does it mean every person has that income? No, that's an average. So inevitably, there will be people out there who either do not have that income, are in poverty, or want to improve their lives. And again, remember, it's a perception. How do I perceive my life? If I perceive my life not good, and I perceive that I can have a better life somewhere else, I will take that arduous journey to go to a better life. Priyanka? And in this arduous journey, inevitably, there are other factors. So, for example, a cousin of mine or a relative of mine who's already in the US will say, you come out here, I'll get you a job. And I know it is very difficult to go through the legal routes. So I go through the illegal route. Aspirations, even in Punjab, has a higher, and there are more people migrating due to cultural influence and competition. Besides that, Shrestha, besides that, but listen, there is an additional problem which happened in Punjab and Haryana because of Green Revolution. Because of the use of pesticides and other things, once the production had reached its peaks, it started decreasing. Number one. Number two, with dividing of land holdings, because as children came about, the land holdings started getting divided. Once land holdings started getting divided and the production started decreasing and the cost of agricultural input, why do you think all these farmer agitations are happening? Because farming is a very, unprofitable profession today, especially with smaller land holdings. And that is one of the reasons why farmers from, let's say, UP and MP are not as much affected as Punjab, because land holding patterns in UP and MP are much smaller, especially UP and Bihar, very small. So it is anyway not a profession. More often than not, the land holding in UP and Bihar are more in terms of the family, taking care of the families, nutrition or whatever. But in Punjab, it is a profession. So these guys now, in the absence of and remember, every person wants to do better. There's an aspiration. Human beings work out of aspirations. So, Jyoti, you're absolutely right. Foreigners come to Asia because the cost of living is that much lesser. In fact, a lot of people now for example, we had read in the European diaspora, the people from North Europe started moving to South Europe because it was cheaper. Similarly, Europeans and Americans come to Asia because it's so much cheaper. It could be a social pressure. Priyanka, remember, it is not a deterministic process. It's not just one process. There are multiple processes which work. Say, for example, in Punjab, when people migrate to, let's say, Canada, then those guys call in their other relatives, or we had seen in terms of diaspora networks having an influence in terms of migration, what we see in the domestic migration also. When a person from, let's say, Bihar or UP comes into Delhi for a job, he calls his brothers, he calls his relatives. There's a whole family which migrates. The same thing happens across international borders. There's an old film called Eat, Pray, Love. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Julia Roberts, Shrestha. I think it is Pray, not Prey, Shrestha. that would make it a little more devious. Though, in fact, a lot of foreigners prey on the Asians and traffic them. So, in a way, it is right. Okay. Yeah, Praful.
Yes, sir. Sir, but I saw the country who is good in per capita income are at the top in happiness index.
Which one is that? Bhutan.
Finland.
But per capita, the happiness index, the top country is Bhutan. It does not have a very high per capita income. See, Praful, you need to also understand the fact that all these Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway, they're very small countries. And besides, their population is extremely small. So I always have been telling you across units that problem with countries like India, China, or Brazil, which are huge countries with huge population, and not only huge population, extreme diverse population. So again, as I keep giving an example of Haryana, which is one of the smallest states, 250 kilometers length and breadth. If you drive across Haryana, you see the kind of diversity in terms of the language, in terms of the food habits, in terms of the dressing, in terms of the culture. With this kind of population density, diversity, length and breadth, it becomes extremely difficult. And that is one of the biggest problems which India and China and Brazil face. So that is why we cannot compare countries, and no two countries are the same. So we cannot compare them. Having said that, Bhutan is also a very small country and has the highest happiness index. So if you want to be really happy, you should leave India and go to Bhutan. They don't even take a visa. You don't need a visa for Bhutan. Praful?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So you have a nice weekend. We'll see each other next Saturday at 3 o'clock. Have a nice week ahead. Bye-bye.